Hey, Mosaic Church, and everybody watching online. This is Alex Diaz. I'm one of the pastors here in Mosaic Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. Welcome to this webinar that we're doing on coping with anxiety and depression and issues of mental health. As you know, because of the current situation, there are many people who are feeling anxiety increase more and more. And this is an area that is dear to my heart as somebody who deals with anxiety. And I've been able to learn as I go and grow more and more. But I wanted to have a couple of guests on this first webinar that we're doing for Mosaic Church. And we're doing this as a part of a schedule of events that we're having online that you're going to see posted right after this. You're going to see what we are calling our digital life. Our digital life is we have had a chance as a church to move everything and all our activities to the online and digital environment. And so you'll be able to see on mosaicchurch.net and in our Facebook page the different events that we will be holding either via Facebook Live or Zoom and private chat rooms. And that way we will get opportunities to connect as a church and to connect with one another and with other people, hopefully around the world as they see our broadcast and videos. We've been praying for you, Mosaic Church, and everybody watching this, and hopefully this is something that can be helpful. So I want to ask our two guests to introduce themselves. Miss B, let's start with you. Can you tell us briefly who you are, what you do, and your background?
Okay, thank you so much, Alex, for having me. My name is Beatrice Klokpah, and I'm a licensed therapist. I practice here in the Central Arkansas area, but I'm also licensed to practice in Texas. And let's see, the population that I work with is working professionals. I mostly work with women, but I also do work with men. I'm a trauma-informed therapist, so I do EMDR, cognitive processing therapy, and I also do some Emmanuel prayer to help people deal with trauma. And then I also work with people who have family of origin issues, specifically as it stems from a family pattern of addiction in their lives, and also people who are in relationship with those who suffer from addiction. So that's kind of a snapshot of the work that I do.
Good deal. And Ms. Carol, how about you?
My name is Carol Gray, and I have a license to practice in the state of Arkansas. And my experience has been, I started off at Arkansas Cares, working with what I call itty bitties. So I've had clients as young as 3, and then I moved over to Methodist Family Health, and I worked with teenagers. And then when we moved to Hot Springs, I worked with incarcerated individuals, and that took me on up to some elderly, but I have not worked actively with the geriatric population. So I have covered it all except for geriatrics. I've also worked in addictions. So I worked at Klokpah House in between there. And now I am teaching at National Park and with teaching a class in cultural diversity, and hopefully working something out with Euler so I can help them with a grant that they have. And then my husband and I have an after school program. So
very good.
That's what I am doing. So
thank you for sharing that. I'm just so interested in this field, and I get exposed as I help people through pastoral counseling. But of course, we don't go deep into the psychological realm as the two of you do. Of course, the both of you are believers. We're all Christ followers in this room, and that's giving us a perspective and direction in what we're doing. And so I think that's where we have a lot of common ground. And I know that I've had with B, I've had conversations with you, and then recently Carol with you as well about how those overlap. So let me start with B, with the questions that we have for all of us today. Right now, it just feels like with the current crisis, let's just call it for what it is. It's a very specific situation, very particular. I was telling somebody the other day, it feels like the rug has been pulled from under me. And I think that there's many people who can relate to that. And that's basically a feeling of losing control. And I think people react to that in different ways. how can we deal with that? How can we respond to that feeling of losing control?
Yeah, that the feeling of losing control is one that I think produces so much anxiety for us, even in small areas of our lives. But something like, this worldwide pandemic that's happening, I think a few things that we can consider doing. First is reevaluating, you know, what what does productivity look like for us in these days, in these next coming weeks and months? Readjusting our expectations for ourselves, our loved ones, maybe even children, because everybody is coping with stress and this anxiety and so much uncertainty very differently. And so I think it's important for us to be mindful about ourselves and other people so that we can try to extend grace to each other, because from day to day, each of us are, we may be responding differently. Our moods may be up and down, depending on maybe what we've watched on the news or whatever the case might be. Mm-hmm. So that will be one of the first things that I would say, is to, extend grace to one another and check in with ourselves, and also to readjust what our expectations are in terms of productivity and expectations that we have for ourselves and other people day to day.
Readjusting our expectations, because basically losing control is dealing with broken expectations, the expectation that we're going to have everything under control. So that's really, really good. And I feel that there's a word that we can tie into this, which is the word surrender. Miss Carol, how can we practice surrender, and especially surrender to Christ when we're feeling out of control?
In the last 2 years, I've really had to learn how to practice surrender. And what I personally have experienced is to ask myself the question, do I really trust God? And so as I had to learn how to practice that questioning of, do I really trust God? Sometimes in these moments, especially in this global pandemic, as a Christian, we have to ask ourselves, do we really trust God? Do we really believe the words that we're reading in the Bible? And if I'm not trusting God, then what is it that he's trying to say to me? Because he might be trying to reveal something to me that he's been wanting to talk to me about, that I haven't been listening to. And so what I do in those moments then is I go back to the word, where it's, the Psalms, where it talks about trusting him, Proverbs, where it talks about trusting him, and the promises that he gives us. And then I focus on the promises of what comes when I trust in him. And then I also ask myself, has he really ever let me down? Because I'm still here, I'm still breathing, I'm still okay. My family is still okay. He's never left me. Even though intellectually I can say, well, he's left me, he's abandoned me, he's done this, he's done that. But really, has he? Because we also have an enemy that wants to tell us that he has. And so, the truth is we're still here, we're still doing okay, we still have everything we need. It may just not look the way we want it to look. So you have to remind yourself that we still are doing okay. We still have a roof over our head. We still have food. May not be the food we want to eat. We still have our family. We still have our loved ones around us. We may not have our friends to give us a hug, but we have our telephones. We have Zoom. We have FaceTime. We have those support systems. So where has God really let us down? He hasn't really let us down yet. In fact, he's made himself bigger than we realize, because he is still here for us, and his word is still here for us, and his promises are still here for us.
Amen. That's really good. And it makes me think that there's a difference between believing in God and believing God.
Yeah.
This is a time when we have to figure out, do we really believe what he says? I mean, we know he's out there somewhere, but do we have any kind of connection with what he has promised us? And so I think you're absolutely right. We have to remain connected to the promises of God. Now, there are people who are dealing with anxiety, with depression, with fear, and oftentimes that is birthed out of brain chemistry.
Mhm.
Other times that has been caused by events during their process of socialization, and so we require coping mechanisms in order to be able to heal through that and grow through that and be able to remain in a sense connected to God and connected to others and wanting to pursue community. So I think being connected with the promises of God is one coping mechanism, and that leads me to my next question, Miss B, is what other coping mechanisms can we suggest to manage anxiety, fear, depression, issues like that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And especially kind of just piggybacking off of what Carol talked about with like, really trusting God and, surrendering something that's completely outside of our control. This is plenty of time for us to practice trusting Him. And so one of the things that I personally do, and I even share with my clients to do, is to do short, simple prayers as a way of coping, right? So I think about it in this sense, like maintaining during this time with there being so much uncertainty, what I am trying to do and what I encourage my clients and my families to do is to maintain a conscious contact with God, right? And praying only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. And so it's like it helps us keep the main thing, and so when we do those short, simple prayers, it's like, okay, what do you need in this moment? What do you need right now? Do you need peace? Do you need an appetite? Do you need the desire to be able to get up and do some exercise, right? Whatever you need, I think doing short, simple prayers is a good way to go. Of course, breathing. I know a lot of people, we realize when we're really anxious or stressed, we stop breathing. Now, I mean, we're not passing out or anything, but we're holding our breath for an unnaturally length amount of time. And so just being aware of that, like, am I holding my breath, or is my body tense? Doing a body scan. And really what that is like where you just kind of, you take some time and you relax and you get out of your head and into your body. And you try to just take notice all the way from you just start at your head and you notice, okay, am I having a lot of tension in my face or in my neck? And you just work your way down to your shoulders, and anywhere that you may feel that there may be tension, you try to relax that area. So one thing that helps you relax that area is tense that specific area that you are focusing on, and then release it. So hold it. You hold tension in that area for maybe 5 seconds, and then you release it. So that's one way to do a body scan. And you literally just start from the top of your head and you work your way down to your feet. So those are a few tips that help. So short, simple prayers, breathing, and doing a body scan. And of course, getting outside whenever we have beautiful weather like this, to get out and get some fresh air and connect with nature and look for God in the details. He speaks in every little thing. If you hear birds chirping, practice gratitude. God, thank you that these birds are singing your praises. I mean, any little thing that you can find to thank God for, really, those are simple ways of maintaining conscious contact with God. That's the other thing, is practicing gratitude. And nature is a great place to be so aware of Him. We just have to look and be aware. So that's what I would say.
That's really good. And you're saying gratitude, and it reminds me of the fact that whenever we're thankful and whenever we lead our emotions, we are able to not only cope but also teach our mind and our limbic system how to react to situations. And especially when they're hard, saying thank you, God, when things are hard, is one of the deepest spiritual disciplines that there is.
Yeah.
But I know it can literally hack your brain and your emotions. Now, for people, Miss Carol, who are dealing with addictions, and there are people who are deep in that, and they were maybe receiving treatment before this crisis, and then they're not receiving treatment anymore, or they were going to meetings and they can't go to meetings anymore because of social distancing. Or maybe they know they have an addiction, but they have not been diagnosed, and they're realizing that in the middle of this situation. So what would you say could be helpful for people like that?
Well, there's kind of a multiple part answer to that, because for the people who are addicted, on those groups, the support system, the NA groups, the AA groups, I'm sure that, and I haven't checked, sorry, that was my dog that sneezed, if you heard that. There's, I'm sure, groups online that they need to be able to seek out. And if there aren't any online, then you need to make sure you contact your sponsor, contact a friend that knows what's going on. Stay in touch, because with the higher level of proximity to family members or to triggers,
Yeah.
It's going to be so important for people to stay in touch and be honest about what's going on. Because as much as you don't want to, the addiction community, I don't want to burden them. They've got their own burdens. I don't want to burden my sponsor. I don't want to burden my friend. You know what? You're probably going to be as much of a relief to them to have contact with outside of their own little world as much as you want contact outside of your own little world. So count on those little things. When I teach in my class, I always say, in my little world, it's all about me. And if anybody needs to get outside of their own little world, it's going to be, and my dog is, I'm sorry.
I hear your dog.
Hope, stop, Hope.
I'm like, what is that?
Jealous.
I just started praying. I'm like, Lord, I don't know what it is, but
she's got allergies, and so she rolls around on the ground and scratches her back,
Oh, okay. I'm like,
but
Lord.
And then it feels good, so she's like, oh, that feels so good.
So she's coping.
She's coping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
But addicts and everything, in the midst of their addiction, in their little world, it's all about them. And as we get outside of that addiction, you learn that you do have to make it all about you, but in a different way, in a different coping mechanism. And it's like, I need to take care of myself so I can help be a better functioning person for the people around me. And so you've got to take care of yourself, and you've got to connect with those other people that are your support system to help you stay sober, to help you stay clean. And so, and then for even those people who are not addicts, like we said earlier, you've got to reach outside of your support system to connect with people. Yesterday, I snapped yesterday on my husband. I did. I'm like, there is so much noise in this house. I can't stand it. And my son, my older one, had just come into the living room, and I go, and what do you want? He goes, I was just coming in here to check on you. So he was doing a very healthy thing, and he was trying to support me, and he had just come out of his room, so he didn't know I was about ready to explode, because I had not been doing any self-care and reaching out to friends. And he saw the explosion. And then after I had my explosion, it happened like everybody, they have their explosion. And then it's like that pressure releases. And I went, okay, honey, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have caught myself before it got to that point. I should have just walked up to you and said, look, there's too much noise in this house. I'm trying to study. I'm trying to do some other things. I need things to be, but I let that pressure build up instead of reaching out. And so everybody has to identify what's going on with them and then do something. And most likely in this situation where we're all trying to stay away from each other in our own little core group, we've got to do something a little bit different to reach out to take care of ourselves.
That's really good. And when you mentioned the word pressure, and I think a good way of looking at self-care is a way of relieving that pressure. and we all have different ways of relieving pressure in ourselves. And if we're not relieving pressure and tension in a healthy way, then it's going to come out in unhealthy ways. And we all deal with that, and we all experience that. I think my wife will quickly tell you that I've also had moments of snapping at my family and others as we're dealing, especially with the current situation. So I think it's very normal and very needed for people to look for that. Now, there are a lot of people who are afraid because they don't know what's going to happen. And we hear these numbers on TV, and we see a neighbor perhaps that got sick. We also hear professionals saying we still don't know the total implications in this type of population or after this amount of time. And so there's so many things that could really give us fear. Miss B, how can we overcome that?
I think it takes us back to the question you asked earlier, which is surrender. Fear is such a powerful emotion that we experience. And like you were talking about hijacking our limbic system, it could put us in that fight, flight, or freeze state. And I think that practicing self-care for me in this time with social distancing is not just with people, but also with what we're listening to, what we're watching, right? Practicing social distancing around that, creating some boundaries, because those things at some point, those news reports, all the numbers, all the uncertainty, even by our leaders, you know, are triggers. They're triggering this fear that's there. And so even with that, I would say short, simple prayers, and to be honest and tell God, I am scared. I don't know. And I'm having a hard time trusting you right now. It makes me think of, I can't quote the scripture, but the guy who I think his son was sick, and he said, Lord, help my unbelief. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
He prayed, and he just, he asked the Lord to help him with his unbelief. So those short, simple prayers, being real honest and transparent with God, in those moments, I think would help. But then also practicing some self-care and not, inundating yourself with the news and with social media that is constantly reporting people either being sick or dying or whatever the case might be. And then even if you are watching those things, I think telling yourself truths, right? So it's like for dialectical behavior therapy, this is really helpful when we struggle with our thought process. And so on one end, there is the emotional mind. On the other end, there's a rational mind. And in the middle is our wise mind. So try to tap into your wise mind. Your wise mind is a place where it's more balanced. There's more truth. There is less criticism. There is less fear, right? So if your emotional mind tells you this is terrible, I'm going to die, my family's going to die, somebody's going to catch this, and it's going to be the worst case scenario, right? That's your emotional mind. And then your rational mind says, okay, the probability of this happening is about 50-40%, whatever they're saying now. And most people that are healthy and, relatively healthy are recovering within 7 days, depending on the day that you watch the report, right? But our wise mind can say, you know what? That it's possible that either one of these things could happen, but I'm going to choose to trust God. I know that this is so out of my control, and I'm going to surrender whatever this process is to the Lord. And I'm going to trust that He's going to take care of me and my family. That could be the wise mind right there in the middle. So essentially it's finding a balance between those two those two ways of thinking. One is not right or wrong, but we do need balance during this time, because it's easy to get very far either on the negative end or completely in denial, where we're living and acting as if this is not happening. So that's what I would suggest.
And I think there's a population that's really feeling fear and anxiety rise, but they don't know how to communicate that, which is children. And so, Ms. Carol, I want to ask you, how does all this relate to children? A lot of them are feeling anxiety because most of us are not in the medical field, and so we may not be translating to them in the best way the current events. And so, how do we follow up with that when we have little ones at home?
I think you have to consider the age of the child, you know, and what they're going to be able to comprehend, and what you know your child or that child is able to deal with. But also being as honest about it without overwhelming them. Mm. You know, I can think of some times as my children have grown up, and you know, you don't have to be quick to answer. You know, be slow to answer, and that's scriptural. And you can even pray and say, Lord, help me answer this question, and don't overburden them. So, you know, if it's a 3-year-old, then say, you know, if the child is like, why do we have to stay home? I don't understand. Why can't I go to the park? You know, why? And just say, you know what? Don't worry about that right now. I'm sorry you can't go to the park, but I want you to trust mommy and daddy, or, you know, whoever's taking care. I want you to trust right now, and then come up with something to distract them. Instead of going to the park, let's get the sidewalk chalk out and let's draw some hopscotch, or let's just draw pictures on the sidewalk, or let's do this instead, or, you know, let's play tag out in the yard, and you know, so you're distracting them. If it's a little bit older, if they're 8 or 9 or 10 and they can understand and they see this stuff going on and they start seeing, you know, everything on TV. And I love what B said, is like, set up boundaries. Boundaries are healthy unless you're isolating. You know, it's like, I'm going to shut myself off to the world. Well, then, you know, that's not healthy either. But right. Boundaries are wonderful things to have. And you are the keeper of the boundaries, just like you're the keeper of your children's boundaries. And so you don't want to isolate them and say, there's something horrible going on in the world and I don't want my child to know about it. That's not healthy either. So give them what they can handle. You know your child, and you trust your instincts about this. You're going to be okay. But if you see your child getting overwhelmed, it's usually going to come out in the form of tears at like age 6 to 12. They're going to be crying and they're not going to be able to understand why. They're going to be a little bit hyper and you're not going to understand why. You know, so those are the kinds of things that you need to. Sometimes kids get angry and they're angry and crying. And they're like, I don't know why I'm angry, because they can't put it into words. And so you help them find those words. All right. And sometimes if kids, or if as an adult, you're finding yourself hyperventilating or your heart is racing, you know, it's okay to ask your child, is your heart racing? Or feel their pulse and see if their heart is racing. Okay. And if they're hyperventilating, I'm going to give you guys a quick, easy thing that you can do to trick your brain into calming down. And so make a list while you're calm of things that you can trick your brain into doing, like naming your top 5 movies. Think of your favorite teachers, name 3 of them. List the 5 states that you want to visit as soon as this thing is over with. And so you see what I'm doing? You're coming up with things that you can list that cause your brain to think. Who are your 5, ask your child, who are your 5 favorite friends at school? And you have to come up with a list of about 20 things that I want you to think that your child can come up with. I want you to think about 5 colors that you want to use, because what happens is when you're anxious, you're thinking on one side of your brain, like B was talking about. But when you come up with lists, you're thinking on the other side of your brain, and you're switching that off, and your brain is going into the thinking mode, and all of a sudden you're going to see your child, or your body is going to go, whew, because you're no longer in that other side of your brain.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's so powerful.
That's and we had to learn that in the jail, because you can't just hand out anti-anxiety medicines in jail. And so you had to get the client to calm down, especially after they just got handed their sentence, when they thought they were going to get out on parole or probation. And they're like, I got sentenced to, you know, however many months in jail, and I can't be here that long. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. let me calm you down first, and then we can start processing what's going on. And so if you need to calm your child down, get them to talk about something else, and then they can tell me what was going on with your body. Describe physically, after you calm them down and have them list, ask them to describe physically what was going on. And then you can find out if it was an anxiety or panic attack, and then you know how to go forward. You know, I need to start coming up with a list of things that they can think of so I can help calm them down.
It's really good. And you did it with me, because the moment you said list the 5 states that you want to visit after all this.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask Ms. B one last question, then I'm going to ask you guys to give an encouraging word. But there are also people who deal with disruptive negative thoughts, and they may be originated from once again either PTSD from the past, brain chemistry, or just as a reaction of what's happening right now. And then people with anxiety, and especially OCD anxiety, that they're going to be focusing on these thoughts, and they're going to fester and fester and fester and fester on that. So how can we deal with that?
Disruptive negative thoughts. That's a good question, Alex. I don't know if I have an answer for that right offhand. Carol, is anything coming to mind for you?
Well, you know, when Alex and you guys had come up with that list, I was thinking about that one because it kind of challenged me a little bit, and I went back to classroom days in our master's programs, and I was thinking, getting out a notebook or getting out a piece of paper and actually writing down what those negative thoughts are, what those automatic thoughts are, and then grounding yourself back in reality. Are those thoughts true? Are those thoughts my reality? Because some of that goes back to PTSD and the things that we've said to ourselves, things that others maybe from an abusive relationship have said to us that are no longer our reality, are no longer our truth, but they've been lying to us. They've been telling us. And so we can do a couple of things. We can start recreating our truth by writing the truth about what is going on now, and not believe that lie and say, no, I'm no longer, I don't believe that I am stupid. I am smart. I am of value. We can back it up with scripture and says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So for every negative thought, we can back it up with scripture and find the scriptures that counteract that. And so we can do mindfulness and write. And so that every time those negative thoughts come in, we can pull out our notebook and we can find the thought or the truth about who we are now versus that negative self-talk that we've wired into our brain that isn't really the truth.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I appreciate you chiming in on that, because I completely kind of drew blank on what would be some things to do. But I think, even thinking about, I think from a trauma lens, picking up the phone and talking to somebody, talking out what you're experiencing, somebody that can help you balance out your thinking. Because when it's a trauma response, somebody that may have been in an abusive relationship or something that triggers something from their past, it can really be hard to get out of the spiral, and so being able to reach out to somebody else that knows you, that knows your story, and that can help you battle some of those thoughts. You don't have to do that piece of it alone. Now, if you're experiencing like dissociating, where you're present in the room physically, but mentally, emotionally, you're just checked out. When you recognize that that's happening, some quick, simple things that you can do. Some people wear like a rubber band around their wrist and they just snap the rubber band back and forth. that helps reground and bring you back to the present moment. Even beating on your chest. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, it'll snap you back into reality. But you know, just hitting on your chest or even on your thighs can help you refocus your mind back into the present moment. So that's what I would say. But I think what Carol suggested was also very much on point.
That's really good. I think we lost her. She's probably going to be logging in
Yeah.
the next few minutes.
Okay.
But both of you triggered thoughts in my mind, and when she was talking about really speaking truth, I learned really to put my thoughts into a grid with 3 columns. And so the first is basically what I'm calling the tale, the story. What are the tales that my mind is telling me? And then the next column, I speak truth to that. So I have the tale, then the truth that I speak to that, and it's often grounded in biblical foundation. And then next to that, there's another column that I'm using, which is trust, which is anything else outside of what I know. I'm going to have to just give it up to God and know that He's going to have my back no matter what in this life or the next. And that's been really helpful. And with what you were saying, I'm not wearing them now because of health regulations and things like that. But I actually started wearing these bracelets that I'm not popping, but they remind me that I am here, I am now, I am well, I am cared for, and I am loved by God. And even if my circumstances are difficult, that is the constant factor in my life, is that He loves me no matter what, no matter how hard things do get. So is there anything, is there an encouraging word that you may have for us? I'm so sorry that we lost.
Me too.
You just kind of wrap it up for us and lead us into an encouraging thought?
Yeah. So I guess the encouraging thought that I would leave is one of my favorite scriptures, Romans 8:28. And it's a mantra of mine. The mantra that I tell myself is all things. But I really do believe that all things are going to work together for our good. And if there is nothing else that you and I both know, Alex, is that seasons do change.
Yeah.
Right? The same way the trees at one point, these green trees were at one point white. They had the little white flowers. I don't know what the trees are called, but now they're green. Spring is here, right? We watched the transition. Even when it was cold and dreary outside, we can look outside of our windows and find some beauty there. And a lot of the times it was in seeing the trees change, seeing the colors change. And so even in seasons that are rough and cold and dreary, there's beauty there. In the same way we're in this season right now, where things are so uncertain and people are dying, people are getting sick, people are afraid. There is still beauty here. We're finding new ways to connect with one another. God has given us plenty of time to seek His face. We have more time with our family and our friends. We can get out and enjoy the sunlight, even if we have we're putting some restrictions around that for ourselves. We can live life in a different way. We can live life a little bit more chill than what we used to, and so there's a leisure to life that God has given us. And I feel that this is grace that God has given us to catch our second wind and to keep going. And we don't have to see that as a bad thing. And again, readjust your expectations for this season. You do not, if you were going 10 to 9, you were at your maximum potential before this might be some time to scale it back. Stop putting all the pressure on yourself to keep up with technology and this and that. I mean, it's not your responsibility to keep up with all of these things. So take the edge off and chill and relax and enjoy the leisure of the day. Like, my father's from Ghana. In Ghana, people nap, during, in the middle of the workday. Right. I mean, but they live longer, they're healthier, they just live very different. Yeah. So we have an opportunity to tap into some of that. And for some of us still get paid and for some that are not, hopefully being able to get some support so that we can at least stay afloat. So finding the good, even in the midst of all the bad, I think is going to be a virtue that many of us can grow in during this time. So
And I
That's
think
what I would say.
that word readjust is so appropriate because
Mm-hmm.
we all make plans and we all have a certain direction, and then in a situation like this all that gets changed. And
Yeah.
so it's okay to readjust. It's okay to draw new objectives even for a short season of crisis like this one. And it's okay to have grace with one another, and with all of us, especially I think in our a lot of people, what they are experiencing is they're moving everything to digital in their workplace if they still have a job. and
Yeah.
and so that has required a level of expertise that not everybody has. And so we're all playing catch up during this
Mm-hmm.
period. You know, have grace with one another in order to do that. It's
Yeah.
been so good to talk to you, and also to Carol.
Yeah.
She said she lost connection, but she says, "Let everyone know I pray they can cope well." So I know
Yeah.
she's gonna be doing that. It's been great to talk to you both,
Yeah.
and thank you for that advice. I think this is going to be helpful for people watching, and for those of you who are part of Mosaic Church. Remember that we're going to be doing teachings and webinars like this on a weekly basis as part of our digital life. So make sure that you go to mosaicchurch.net and check out our digital life. And by the way, if you go to mosaicchurch.net/my digital life, you'll be able to find a page that you can save onto your home on your smart device. And that way you don't have to look it up all the time. You can just pull it up from your home screen and it'll be right there in a way that you can read it quickly and be able to follow with everything that's going on. Beatrice, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Carol, and God bless you. Hope everything continues to work out well for you and for her. And we will talk again soon.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.